3 days before Christmas, my wife stood up at her sister's party, raised her glass, and called me the most loyal man she had ever married. The room laughed. I laughed with them. Then she turned to her sister, sure I'd walked off for more wine, and dropped her voice. He's too trusting to ever check. She wasn't talking about the presents. For 14 years, she had raised a secret an arm's length from me, certain the steady one, the man who paid every bill and never asked a question, would never do the math. I'd done the math in October. I set my glass down. I refilled hers. I wished her sister a Merry Christmas. She was right that I trust her. She never once asked what a trusting man does the day the trust finally runs out. I'm Ramsey. I'm 35, a structural engineer, and I have spent my whole life being the reliable one. That night, I understood exactly what my reliability had cost me, and I had already decided what came next. Let me back up to the party, because the party is where you can see all of it, if you know where to look. Sloan, my sister-in-law, throws the same holiday party every year in the same brick house on Delmar Court. Same white lights, same platter of stuffed mushrooms nobody eats, same 14 people crammed into a living room built for 8. My wife's family fills a room the way water fills a boot, completely, and with a slow, quiet pressure you only notice when you try to move. I stood by the window with a plastic cup watching my daughter. Della is 13. She was on the floor with the little cousins, teaching them to fold paper snowflakes, her tongue between her teeth, the way it goes when she concentrates. She has my mother's stubborn hairline and a laugh that fills a house. She had made an ornament for her Aunt Sloan out of craft wire and blue glass beads, and she was waiting, all night, for someone to notice it on the tree. My son Theo, who is 8, had fallen asleep under the coat rack with a cookie in his fist. And my wife, Vivian, stood in the center of the room, glass in hand, holding court. She is very good at her room. She has always been the brightest thing in any room she enters, and for 14 years I have loved watching her do it. The way she remembers everyone's name, the way she laughs a half second before the punchline lands, the way people lean toward her like plants toward a window. I used to think I was lucky just to be standing next to it. That night, I watched her raise her glass and say my name like a warm thing. To Ramsey, 14 years, the most loyal man I ever married. Everyone said aw. My mother-in-law, Corrine, dabbed her eyes, which is a performance she can do on command. And then Vivian leaned toward Sloan and said the other thing, the quiet thing, the true thing. He's too trusting to ever check. Here is what she didn't know. I hadn't gone for wine. I was standing 4 feet away in the dark of the hallway, holding my daughter's coat because she'd asked me to keep her phone in the pocket safe. I heard every word. And I did the only thing a man can do when the floor of his life quietly drops 2 inches and nobody else in the room feels it move. I smiled. I walked back in. I refilled her glass because I already knew what she was talking about. I'd known since October, and the folder in the toolbox of my truck, in the cold dark of Sloan's driveway, held the reason her sentence had a second half she'd never bothered to imagine. If your chest just went tight, if you've ever been the person other people call safe while they laughed about it behind a hallway wall, take a second and hit like, and subscribe if you can. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one, and I like knowing who's in the room with me tonight. Now let me take you back to October, to the afternoon I stopped being the man they thought I was. It started with a bank. We were refinancing the house on Ridgeline, the house I built, and I mean that close to literally. I framed half of it myself on weekends the year Theo was born. The loan officer, a patient woman named Bev, needed my old service records to verify a VA entitlement, deployment dates, discharge paperwork, the dry, boring documents a man keeps in a fireproof box in the garage and never opens because opening them means remembering being 21 and 8,000 miles from home. I pulled the box down on a Saturday. Rain on the garage roof, Theo's bike upside down in the corner where he'd left it. I found the orders. I found the entry and exit stamps from the deployment, the exact days the Army moved me overseas and the exact day it brought me back. I laid them on the workbench to scan them for Bev. And my eye, out of pure habit, snagged on a number. I've done load calculations for a living for a decade. I don't decide to check math. It checks itself behind my eyes before I've agreed to it. The date said I left the country in the fall. The date said I came home the following summer. 8 months. And somewhere in the middle of those 8 months, according to a birth certificate I'd framed and hung in a hallway and walked past 10,000 times, my daughter had been conceived. I stood very still. Then I did the thing Vivian was certain I would never do. I checked. Let me tell you who I was before that Saturday, so you understand what broke and what didn't. I grew up outside Dillard with a father who fixed diesel engines and a mother who cleaned other people's houses and never once let me feel poor. I learned early that being dependable was a kind of love you could give even when you had nothing else. You show up, you carry the heavy end, you don't make it about you. I met Vivian at a friend's cookout the summer I was 20. She was 19, home from her first year of college, brighter than the string lights. Her mother ran a house staging business and had opinions about my boots. Vivian didn't. She laughed at my jokes and let me drive her home the long way, and by August, I would have walked into traffic for her. We married fast. Too fast, her mother said loudly for years. But I had orders. The Army was sending me over, and I didn't want to leave without her name next to mine. So we stood in a courthouse in July, and 6 weeks later, I got on a plane. I called when I could. The connection was bad, and the hours were worse. She sounded far away and more than miles, but I told myself that was the deployment. That was the distance. That was normal. When I came home the next summer, she was pregnant. I remember dropping my bag on the porch and lifting her off her feet, and she cried, and I thanked God on my knees that night for a life I hadn't earned. Della came in September, 9 pounds, furious, perfect. I counted her fingers twice. I never counted the months. Why would I? You don't audit a gift. That's the man Vivian married. That's the man she was laughing about in the hallway. And she wasn't wrong about him. He was too trusting to ever check. But I want to be clear about something because it matters for everything that comes after. I did not do the math to catch her. I did the math because a bank asked me for a date, and the date didn't fit. And I am physically unable to leave a number alone that doesn't fit. I sat in that garage for an hour with the rain coming down, holding 2 pieces of paper, and I did the arithmetic a dozen times, hoping I'd made an error a 21-year-old's memory could explain. I hadn't. The conception window fell in December. I did not set foot in this country in December that year. I have the stamps that prove it, stamped by a government that does not care about anyone's feelings. There was no version of the math where Della was mine. And here is the part I need you to hold on to because the family never understood it, and Vivian understood it least of all. In that hour, in that garage, I did not stop loving my daughter for a single second. Not one. I have loved Della since before she had a name. I taught her to ride a bike on Ridgeline Court. I sat up with her the night she had croup and steamed the bathroom until 3 a.m. I am the one who checks the closet. I am the one whose old sweatshirt she steals. Whatever a strip of paper said about a December I spent in a place I still dream about, it could not touch 1 hour of 13 years. What I lost in that garage wasn't my daughter. What I lost was the story of my marriage. And I sat there a long time learning the shape of the hole where that story used to be. I didn't say anything, not that day, not for weeks. People will ask why. People always ask why the quiet one stays quiet, like silence is the same thing as weakness. Let me tell you what silence actually is when a careful man goes still. It's a man taking measurements. Because the moment I understood the math, I understood something else. If the dates were a secret, then Vivian had known them for 14 years. She had held that knowledge across every anniversary, every hospital visit, every time I stood up at a school play and clapped until my hands hurt. She had watched me love a truth she was hiding, and she had decided over and over, every single day, to let me. That is not an accident you confess in a panic. That is a decision you renew. And a decision renewed for 14 years is not fragile. You don't undo it with a shouting match in a garage. You don't undo it at all, really. You just decide, finally, to stop being the only person in the marriage who doesn't know what marriage you're in. So I closed the box. I scanned the pages for Bev. I sent the bank its dates. And I started, very quietly, to check everything else. The first thing I checked was the money. I'm the one who pays the bills, which sounds like control but is actually the opposite. It's the chore nobody else wanted, handed to the reliable one, the way chores always are. For years, I'd moved through our accounts on autopilot, paying the mortgage, the car, Della's braces, Theo's baseball, never really looking because why would I look? I trusted her. In November, I looked, And I found a savings account I didn't recognize. Her name only. Opened 18 months earlier, fed by small, regular transfers out of our joint account. 300 here, 500 there, coded as household, so they'd slide past a man who never checked. $60,000. I sat with that number the way I'd sat with the dates. Not angry yet, just still. A structural engineer learns to read a building for the cracks that mean it's coming down, and I was reading my marriage the same way, finding the stress fractures I'd walked past for years because I'd decided in advance the house was sound. $60,000 quietly moved is not a woman saving for a rainy day. It's a woman building a bridge to somewhere I wasn't invited. I spent 3 nights tracing it after everyone was asleep, at the kitchen table where I'd later refuse to sign, with the laptop glow on my face and a legal pad going full of numbers in my engineer's block print. The transfers ran back 18 months, and they were smart. Never the same amount twice in a row. Never a round number that would catch an eye. 320 here, 480 there. Always coded household, which is the one category a man like me never audits, because household is groceries and diapers and the 1,000 small costs of keeping people alive. And you don't question the cost of keeping your people alive. She'd known exactly which drawer of my attention would never open. She'd been right for 18 months. I mapped it out on the legal pad like a load diagram. Every transfer, every date, the running total climbing down the page, and a pattern surfaced that made the back of my neck cold. The transfers got bigger after certain dates. After our anniversary in July, a jump. After Corrine's birthday in September, another. As if every time the family gathered and reaffirmed the story of who I was, Vivian went home and moved a little more weight onto her private bridge. The last transfer had cleared 11 days before I found it. $900. Coded, of course, household. I called the bank the next morning. My bank, our bank, where Bev worked, though I didn't go to Bev for this. I sat across from a young account manager and asked plain questions in my plain voice, and I learned the account was solely Vivian's, that I had no access, and that this was, the young man assured me helpfully, very common for couples doing estate planning. Estate planning. I thanked him. I drove to a job site and climbed down into a stranger's crawl space and sat in the dark under someone else's house for a while, which is, I've found, a good place to think. Dirt and cool air and the whole weight of a home resting on posts you can reach out and touch. I understood down there that my wife had been estate planning me out of my own estate for a year and a half, one grocery-coded transfer at a time, and that her mother had almost certainly drawn the blueprint. $60,000 is a lot of quiet. It's a lot of dinners where she passed me the salt and asked about my day. It's the exact price, it turns out, of a woman deciding you're a line item. I climbed back out of that crawl space, and I did not slam anything, and I did not call anyone. I brushed the dirt off my knees, and I went to my next appointment because I had houses to inspect and because I'd already learned the most useful thing a betrayed man can know. The person who stays calm gets to choose the day. I want to stop here and tell you about the folder because it becomes important, and because I need you to understand it was never a weapon I built. It was a wound I organized so I could look at it without going under. I bought a plain manila folder at the drugstore. I put the deployment orders in it, the entry and exit stamps, a printout of the mystery account, Della's birth certificate, nothing dramatic, just paper, just the true shape of my life in one place where I could hold it in 2 hands. I kept it in the toolbox of my truck, under the socket set, because it was the one place in my life no one else ever opened. And every few days, I'd sit in the driveway before coming inside, and I'd open it, and I'd close it, and I'd walk into my house and kiss my wife and read my kids a story. That's the man in the hallway at Sloan's party, a man with a folder in his truck and a daughter's coat over his arm, listening to the woman he married explain to her sister that he was too trusting to ever check. November was the strangest month of my life, and I need you to sit inside it with me, because the strangeness is the whole point. I inspect foundations for a living, cracks settling, the slow lean of a wall that's been carrying more than it was built for. All day I walked other people's basements with a flashlight and a moisture meter, reading houses for the failures the owners had decided not to see. Then I drove home every night and ran the same inspection on my own life, from the inside, with a smile on my face. Vivian never suspected a thing. Why would she? The reliable one had run on the same rails for 14 years, and I kept them running. I paid the mortgage on the first. I hauled the cans to the curb on Tuesday. I laughed at Corrine's jokes on Sunday. A man who changes nothing on the outside can change everything underneath, and nobody tests the load on a beam that has never once complained. But I was watching now, and when you finally watch a thing you trusted blind, you see the whole machine. I saw how she talked to me in front of the kids. We were at dinner, a Tuesday, meatloaf, and Theo asked me a question about his baseball glove, and Vivian answered for me before I opened my mouth. "Ask your father," she said, smiling. "He'll turn it into a physics lecture." The kids laughed. I laughed. And a year earlier, I'd have laughed and meant it, because that's a normal thing a wife says about a husband who loves a subject too much. But I was awake now, and I heard the second track under the words, the one Corrine recorded into both her daughters before they could drive. The track that says, "Your father is a little slow, a little safe, a little much, fond, and just faintly beneath you." She'd been playing it at low volume for years at every dinner, in front of my children, teaching them the family opinion of me, one warm insult at a time. I never said a word about it. I just started counting. Some nights it was 2, some nights it was 5. I saw the phone too. Vivian keeps her phone face down now, which she didn't used to, and it buzzes at hours a phone shouldn't. One night, loading the dishwasher, I watched the screen light up on the counter. Mom, 10:41 p.m., and a preview that read, "Did you get the appraisal yet? Don't let him." Before it went dark, I closed the dishwasher. I did not pick up the phone. A careful man doesn't need to read the whole message when the first 6 words tell him the shape of the thing. Don't let him. 2 words that reorganized a marriage. Don't let him what? Check. Notice. Wake up. Too late, Corrine. 2 months too late. And I saw the plan take shape in ways so small that a sleeping man would have slept right through them. Vivian started tidying rooms she'd never cared about, standing in doorways with her phone, framing corners. She called it insurance photos. I knew Delmar Staging's whole language by then. I'd married into it. And I knew you don't photograph a room like that to insure it. You photograph it like that to sell it. She was staging my house while I was standing in it. And she was sure I couldn't tell the difference. Because for 14 years, I never had. I could have stopped her. I could have flipped the table any of a dozen nights. I want you to understand why I didn't. Because it's the same reason I smiled at the party. And it's the only thing I'm actually proud of in this whole story. Because in between all of it, the meatloaf, the phone, the framing corners, there were my kids. And they saved my life that November. And I mean that as plainly as a man can mean anything. Theo made the all-star team for Winter League, and we spent Saturday mornings in the cold at the batting cages, just the 2 of us, my breath fogging while I fed the machine quarters, and he swung and missed and swung and connected, and the crack of it went through me like church. He is mine by blood, my son. Though I want to tell you something that took me the whole month to understand. After October, that word stopped meaning to me what it means to everyone else. Blood told me Theo was mine. 13 years told me Della was. And 13 years, it turns out, is the stronger material. I'd stake a building on it. And Della, my Della, built a bridge that month. Her science project, the load-bearing arches. She picked it, she told me, because that's your thing, Dad, and I had to go stand in the garage for a minute after she said it, next to the toolbox with the folder in it, and get my face right before I came back in. We built a scale arch out of little wooden blocks on the kitchen table. No glue, just geometry, the way the Romans did it, and she tested it with her brother's textbooks, stacking them one at a time while Theo counted, and when it held 40 pounds without a crack, she screamed and threw her arms around my neck. "How does it not fall down, Dad?" she said. "There's nothing holding it up." "The weight holds it up," I told her. "Every stone pushing against the next one. Take one away, and the whole thing stands stronger, because now it has to." I tapped the keystone at the top. "The trick is you build it so the load makes it tighter instead of pulling it apart." She looked at the arch for a long time. "That's kind of beautiful," she said. 13 years old, and she saw it. The load makes it tighter. I've built my whole life on that principle and never once said it out loud. And my daughter, the one they kept in a pocket, the one a strip of paper said wasn't mine, looked at a pile of blocks and understood me better in one afternoon than her mother had in 14 years. That's what I was protecting. Not my pride. Not the house, even. That. The kid who gets me. The one person in that whole family who ever looked at what I actually am and called it beautiful. You do not flip the table over a woman's cruelty when your daughter is asleep down the hall dreaming about arches. You measure. You wait. You build it so the load makes it tighter. She had no idea I'd become the most careful man in 3 counties. I need to introduce you to Corrine because you can't understand Vivian without her mother. Corrine is 61 and runs Delmar Staging, the little business that put fresh throw pillows on other people's foreclosures and taught my mother-in-law to believe that presentation is the only truth that matters. She raised 2 daughters on the wreckage of a bad divorce, and the lesson she carved into both of them was simple and it was cruel. A man is a foundation, and you never, ever let the foundation know it's replaceable. She never liked me, not because I was cruel or lazy or unfaithful. I was none of those, and she knew it. She didn't like me because I was earnest, because I loved out loud, because I was, in her word, which I heard her use once through a screen door, soft. To Corrine, a man who trusts his wife is a man who has handed her a loaded gun and turned his back. She admired her daughter for holding the gun. She'd have admired her more for using it. I mention Corrine now because when I finally started watching my own life, I saw her fingerprints on all of it. The account was Corrine's kind of idea. The party toast, loud loyalty in public, contempt in the hallway. That was a Delmar Staging move, all pillows and rot. And the thing Vivian was building, the thing $60,000 was the down payment on, that had Corrine's blueprint all over it. They weren't just leaving. They were staging the house before they sold the man who built it. If you've ever felt a family close ranks around the person hurting you, if you've ever been outnumbered in a room by people who share a last name and a story about you that isn't true, pause here and tell me what you think they were planning. Say it in the comments before I tell you. Most people guess the money. Almost nobody guesses how far they were willing to go with Della. Sunday dinner at Corrine's is a command performance, and the first Sunday of December I went, and I watched it like a man watching a play. He's been cast in without a script. Corrine's dining room is staged like one of her listings. Everything beautiful, nothing warm, a bowl of decorative lemons on the table that no one is allowed to eat. She seated me at the foot, which she always does, the position that looks like the head and functions like the door. Vivian sat at her mother's right hand, Sloane across from me pushing food around her plate, the kids at a card table in the next room, which is where Corrine prefers children, adjacent. The conversation went where it always goes. Corrine's clients, Corrine's opinions, the neighbors who bought completely wrong, and the ones who listened to me and made 40 grand. Then she turned to me with the smile she uses like a scalpel. "Ramsey, how's the crawl space business?" she said. Not a question, a reminder for the table of what I am, a man who goes under houses. "Foundations," I said. "It's good." "He's being modest," Vivian said, and I braced, because in this family modest is the setup. "He turned down a management track twice, wants to keep his hands dirty." She said it fond. She said it like a diagnosis. Some men just aren't built to want more. Corrine laughed. "Well," she said, "somebody has to hold up the ceiling." And the whole table laughed, and in the next room I heard Della laugh too, because she'd learned the family's opinion of her father the way you learn a song, without deciding to. That one landed. I'll be honest with you, that one I felt in my chest. And I set down my fork under the table so no one would see my hand, because there it was. The whole machine, running in the open, and nobody at that table thought they were doing anything but making pleasant conversation. Corrine wasn't a cartoon. She wasn't twirling a mustache. She was a woman who'd been left, once, by a man who thought he was too good to hold up a ceiling. And she'd spent 20 years teaching her daughters that the only safety is to be the one holding the leverage. In her mind, she was protecting her girl. In her mind, I was a decent foundation she was helping Vivian upgrade before it settled. She half believed she was being kind. Understanding it didn't make it hurt less. It made it hurt worse and cleaner, because I finally saw that no explanation of mine would ever have reached these people. You cannot argue a foundation into being loved by people who only ever wanted a taller house. I drove home that night and I hit the wall I'd been driving toward for a month. I want to tell you about the wall because the videos that make this look easy are lying to you. There was a night, that night, where I nearly folded on my own, with no pen in sight, no one cornering me. I sat in the truck in my own driveway with the folder open on the passenger seat. and a voice in me that sounded a lot like exhaustion said, "Sign it. Keep the peace. Della never has to know. Theo keeps his family whole. You keep the mornings at the batting cage, and all it costs is you. All it costs is you." That's the deal Corrine offers. She's offered it to every foundation she ever met, and most of them take it, because when you've spent your life being the one who folds so the family can stay standing, folding one more time feels like the last generous thing you have left to give. I sat there a long time. I opened the folder, I closed it, and what turned me back wasn't rage, and it wasn't the money, and it wasn't even the marriage. It was the load makes it tighter. I thought about my daughter's arch on the kitchen table, holding 40 pounds because every stone was pushing back against the next one. Take one away, and the whole thing stands stronger, because now it has to. And I understood, sitting in that cold truck, that I'd been trying to be the stone that quietly slides out so nothing above it has to feel the shift. That's not how you save a structure. That's how you drop a roof on the people you love and call it peace. I went inside. I checked on both kids. Della had fallen asleep with a library book on arches open on her chest, and I lifted it off and marked her page. And I stood in that hallway with the framed birth certificate, and I made the load-bearing decision. Not out, through. I went to see Declan in December, the week before the party. Declan Walsh and I were combat engineers together the year the math says everything changed. He pulled me out of a collapsed culvert once and never let me forget it. After the Army, he went to law school on the GI Bill and does family law now, in a strip mall office with a space heater and a diploma he's proud of. He is the one person alive who knew me at 21, and the only person I told. I laid the folder on his desk. He read it in silence, the space heater ticking in the corner. A photo of us at 21 on the shelf behind him, two skinny kids in ACS, squinting into a sun on the other side of the world, on the exact deployment those papers were about. He read every page. Then he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes the way he does when a bridge won't hold. For a minute, he didn't say anything lawyerly at all. He got up, poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot he keeps burning all day, set one in front of me, and sat back down. It's the thing he does. He poured me coffee in a worse place than that office, once, after they dug me out. Some men, when they find out your whole life is a lie, want to fix it. Declan just wanted to make sure I ate something and knew I wasn't alone in the room. "You okay?" he asked. Friend first, lawyer second. "No," I said, because I don't lie to Declan either. "Good," he said. "Don't be. But you came to the right guy because I'm going to make sure the person who lied for 14 years doesn't also get to write the ending." He put the glasses back on. "Lawyer now." "Ramsey," he said, "I have to ask you something, and I need the real answer. What do you want?" I'd been waiting weeks for someone to ask me a question I could actually answer. "I want my kids," I said. "I want my house. And I do not want Della to spend one day of her life thinking she's less mine because of a date on a piece of paper." Declan nodded slowly. "Then listen to me, because the law is about to be kinder to you than you think, and your wife is about to learn she built her whole plan on a rule she never read." He told me 3 things that afternoon. I'm going to tell them to you the way he told me, because they're the spine of everything that happened at the end, and I don't want you to think for 1 second that any of it was a trick. The first thing, Della was conceived and born inside your marriage, Declan said. That makes you her legal father, not her stepfather, not her guardian, her father, full stop. There's a window to contest that. In this state, it closes fast, a couple of years at most. That window shut when she was a toddler. He tapped the birth certificate. You've been her father, in the eyes of the law, for over a decade. Nobody, not Vivian, not a DNA test, not the man in that December, can walk in now and undo it. Biology had its chance to matter. The clock ran out years ago. I put my hand over my mouth. I'm not ashamed to say it. Because I had spent 2 months braced for the moment someone told me Della wasn't mine on paper the way she wasn't mine in blood. And here was a tired veteran in a strip mall telling me the opposite. The law, for once, agreed with my heart. The second thing, the house has a VA entitlement in your name from before the marriage stabilized, and you've got the sole labor and separate contribution paper trail because you're the guy who keeps everything. He almost smiled. The reliable one. Turns out reliable is a legal asset. That house is far more yours than she thinks. She cannot simply take it and stage it and sell it out from under you. The third thing was the one that mattered most, and he said it looking right at me. The $60,000 and the hidden account, that's not you being paranoid. That's marital fraud, and it'll surface the second lawyers get involved. But Ramsey, he leaned forward. Do not go to war for war's sake. You've got 2 kids. The win here isn't burning her down in public. The win is walking out of this with your children, your house, and your dignity, and letting her keep exactly the freedom she was stealing to buy. Give her the door. Just make sure it's the door and not everything you built. I drove home that night and sat in the driveway and opened the folder one more time. I understood, finally, what I was holding. Not a bomb, a key. And I understood what Vivian had gotten wrong about me for 14 years, the thing Corrine taught her to believe, that a man who trusts is a man who's blind. I wasn't blind, I was patient. There is a difference. And by God, they were about to learn it. Here's what I did not do, and I want credit for the restraint, because it cost me. I did not tell Della. She was 13 and folding snowflakes and waiting for someone to notice her ornament on the tree, and I was not going to hand her a grenade to hold just because her mother had handed me one. Whatever came, Della would come out the other side knowing exactly one thing, that her father chose her, on purpose, with his eyes open. I did not confront Vivian. Not yet. A confrontation is a gift you give the other person, a chance to explain, to cry, to reshuffle the story before witnesses. I had watched Corrine reshuffle a story 100 times. I wasn't going to hand my wife the deck, and I did not touch the $60,000. Let it sit. Let it prove itself. What I did was live, carefully, warmly, and completely awake, for the strangest 3 weeks of my life. I made Theo's lunches. I helped Della with a science project on load-bearing arches, which she picked, she said, because that's your thing, Dad. And I had to leave the room for a minute after she said it. I took Vivian's coat at parties and refilled her glass and told her she looked beautiful, because she did, and because I am not built to lie even to a woman who'd made lying a 14-year marriage. You want to know the hardest thing I've ever done? It wasn't the deployment. It was passing the butter to a woman across a breakfast table, smiling, while a folder in my truck knew more about my life than I'd known for 13 years. I did it because Declan was right. The win was not the explosion. The win was the exit. Mine, clean, with my children's hands in mine. And every night, after the kids were down, I'd stand in the hallway outside Della's room, the same hallway that runs past that framed birth certificate, and I'd listen to her breathe, and I'd promise the dark that whatever her mother had built, it would not fall on this kid. Not on my watch. Not ever. Living those weeks meant running 2 clocks at once, and I could hear both of them ticking. Hers sped up all December. The framing photos multiplied. She had a call with someone she called just a friend from Mom's office that ended the second I walked in. A moving supply box, flattened, appeared behind the recycling, and disappeared the next morning when she realized I might see it. She was building toward January, and every day her clock ran a little faster because a plan that depends on the other person staying asleep gets nervous the longer it waits. The nerves showed once. A Tuesday, mid-December, I came home early from a job canceled for weather and found a man in a quilted vest standing in my driveway with a clipboard and a laser measure, walking the front of my house. Corrine's kind of man. He introduced himself as an appraiser, said he was just doing the exterior, Mrs. Caldwell set it up, and asked if the roof was original. I stood on my own porch, keys in my hand, and I felt the whole thing tighten one more click. She'd sent an appraiser to the house I framed with my own hands to put a number on it for a sale I hadn't been told about, and she'd done it on a workday because she was sure I'd be under some stranger's house across town. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. The roof's 8 years old. I put it on myself, I told him, but you can pack it up. This house isn't being appraised, and it isn't being listed, and if Delmar Staging sent you, tell Corrine the owner said so. I unlocked my door. Have a good one. Drive safe. It's icing up. He looked at his clipboard, looked at me, and left. I never mentioned it to Vivian. Let her wonder why the appraiser didn't call back. Let her clock run a little faster in the dark. A careful man doesn't announce every card the second it's in his hand. He lets the other side keep betting on a deck that's already been cut. Mine ran quiet, the way I do everything. I met Declan twice more, early mornings before work, in a diner off the highway where nobody we knew would ever eat. Under the fluorescent lights, over bad coffee, we did the boring, load-bearing work that actually wins these things. The work Corrine never respected, which is exactly why she lost. I opened an account in my own name and moved nothing improper into it, just my next paychecks, so I wouldn't be left with nothing the day she moved the $60,000 out of reach. I pulled every document a careful man keeps and made clean copies. The VA paperwork, the framing invoices, the labor logs, 13 years of a life I'd filed away because filing things is what the reliable one does when everyone else is out having opinions. "You know what wins custody?" Declan said one morning, tapping his cup. "Not the dramatic stuff. It's the guy who's got the pediatrician's number memorized and knows which kid is allergic to what. It's the parent the school already calls first." He looked at me. "Ramsey, you've been building that case by accident for 13 years. You just called it being a dad." I copied the folders that morning. 2 copies. One for Declan's office safe, one taped under a drawer at work. Not because I planned to wave it in anyone's face. I still hoped I'd never have to, because a man who's been kept in the dark for 14 years learns, finally, to keep a light where the other person can't reach the switch. I told my mother 2 weeks before Christmas. I drove out to Dillard on a Sunday, to the small house that always smells like coffee and clean laundry, and I sat at her kitchen table. A real one, scarred and warm, nothing staged about it, and I told her all of it. The dates, the account, Della. She listened the way she's listened my whole life, hands folded, saying nothing until I was done. My mother cleaned other people's houses for 30 years and never once let me feel poor, and she has a way of being quiet that makes a room safe to fall apart in. I didn't fall apart, but I could have, and that's the point of her. When I finished, she got up, refilled my coffee, and sat back down. Then she said the only thing anyone said in those 3 months that I've kept next to my daughter's words. "That baby was never a mistake because of who her father is," she said. "She's your daughter because of who her father is." She reached across and put her hand over mine, the cleaning, scarred hand that raised me. "You didn't get tricked into loving that girl, Ramsey. You loved her on purpose. Don't you let anybody, especially not that woman's mother, tell you a thing you did on purpose for 13 years was a thing that happened to you." I didn't trust my voice for a minute. "They think being trusting made me a fool," I finally said. "Being trusting made you a good man," she said. "What you do next is what decides if you're a smart one." She patted my hand once and stood up to start dinner, because in my family, the deepest love is a woman who says the truest thing you've ever heard, and then asks if you're staying for pot roast. I stayed for pot roast. I drove home in the dark a little more myself than I'd been in months, and I nearly gave it all away once. I'll tell you, because I promised you the truth and not the polished version. Vivian came into the garage one Saturday while I was out there organizing tools, which is what I called sitting with the folder. I had it open on the workbench. I heard the door, and I did not have time to close it, so I did the only thing I could. I laid a shop rag over it, casual, and picked up a wrench like I'd been reaching for it. "What are you doing out here so much lately?" she asked. Not suspicious exactly. Testing the beam. "Della's science project," I said, which was true enough to survive her eyes, "building her an arch." She looked at me a moment longer than she needed to. Then she said, "You spend more time on that kid's homework than you do on us." And she went back inside, and she never once wondered why the reliable one's hands were steady on a wrench while his whole life balanced under a shop rag 8 inches from hers. That's the closest it came. A shop rag. 14 years of trust, and it held on a shop rag because she could not conceive of a world where I was the one with something to hide. But the weeks weren't all diner coffee and near misses. I was still dad, and December still had a Christmas in it, and I was not going to let what I knew steal my kids' holiday any more than I'd let it steal their father. Della and I went shopping for Theo the second week of December, just us, and afterward she dragged me into a craft store for one thing, and spent 45 minutes choosing blue glass beads for an ornament she wouldn't tell me the plan for. She was making it for Sloan, it turned out, because Sloan had told her once that blue was her favorite, and Della is the kind of kid who files that away and gives it back a year later, wired into glass. She's more like me than any test could measure. She keeps things. She shows up. Standing in that craft store, watching my daughter hold two nearly identical shades of blue up to the light, dead serious about getting it right for an aunt who was, at that very moment, half in on a plan to use her as leverage, I had to turn and pretend to study a rack of ribbon until my eyes cleared. Because that's who they were treating like a bargaining chip, a 13-year-old who remembered her aunt's favorite color for a year. And that's the load I decided, right there between the ribbon and the beads, that they were never going to drop on her. Theo got me a different way. He's 8, and he doesn't keep things the way his sister does. He just says them. One night that week, brushing his teeth, foam everywhere, he looked at me in the mirror and said, "Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to be an engineer like you, and we can inspect houses together." Then he spat and grinned and asked if we could get waffles. I said yes to the waffles. I did not say the thing sitting behind my teeth, which was that a lawyer and I were quietly making sure that mornings like this one, toothpaste and waffles and a kid who wants to be like me, didn't get packed into a box behind the recycling and moved across town without my name on the paperwork. He wanted to inspect houses with me someday. I was, at that exact moment, inspecting ours for the failure his mother had built into the load-bearing wall. He'll understand it all someday. That night, he just needed his waffles and his dad, and for one more morning, I made sure he got both. That's the war they never saw. Not shouting. Waffles. A man holding a whole ordinary life together with 2 hands so his kids could keep standing inside it while the ground shifted. You want to know the hardest part? It wasn't the fear, it was the tenderness. It was loving all of them, even Vivian, some worn-out ember of it, while I quietly built the thing that would end us. A cruel man's job would have been easy. Mine was the opposite. I had to keep my heart soft enough to keep being their father, and hard enough to keep being the one adult in the house with his eyes open. Some nights, I didn't know how a person holds both. Most nights, I just held the kid's doorframe and breathed until I did. The party at Sloan's was 3 days before Christmas, and it was, though I didn't know it yet, the last night the old story was still standing. There's a part of that night I left out of the opening, because it belongs here, where you can feel the whole weight of it. Della's ornament, the blue glass one, the one she'd spent 45 minutes choosing beads for, the one she made for Sloan because Sloan once said blue was her favorite. She'd wrapped it herself in tissue and carried it on her lap the whole drive over, and the second we walked in, she found the tree and hung it dead center, at eye level. And then she stood back and waited for her aunt to see it. She waited a long time. I watched her wait, a kid orbiting a Christmas tree all evening, drifting back to it, adjusting the tissue, glancing at the adults, hoping. Around 9, Sloan finally drifted past the tree with a wine glass and Corrine at her elbow, and Della lit up and said, "Aunt Sloan, I made you something. It's the blue one," and pointed. And Corrine, not Sloan, Corrine, leaned in, glanced at it, and said, "Oh, isn't that nice? Sloan, honey, is that wire? It's going to scratch the good ornaments." And she reached up and moved it, just a few inches, off the center, around the side, to the back of the tree where the branches thin out and the lights don't reach. The place you put the ornament you have to display, but don't want seen. She did it without malice, which is the part that stays with me. She did it the way you'd move a thing that's slightly in the wrong place. My daughter's whole December, wired into glass, relocated to the dark side of the tree by a woman who'd never once considered that the child was watching. Della's face did a thing I'll spend the rest of my life unseeing. It didn't crumple. That's the worst part. She's a Caldwell. She keeps things. She absorbs. Her face just went quietly still, the exact stillness I'd worn in the hallway an hour before, and she said, "Okay, small." And she went and sat by her sleeping brother under the coat rack and didn't go near the tree again. I got up. I walked to the tree. And in front of Corrine and Sloan and anybody watching, I took that blue ornament off the dark side of the tree and I moved it back to the center, to eye level, where the lights hit the glass and threw little blue coins of light on the wall. "There," I said. "Della made that. It's the best thing on the tree." I said it easy, no heat, the way I say most things. Corrine's mouth tightened. Sloan looked at the floor. Then I went and sat down on the carpet next to my daughter, and I told her the blue caught the light better than anything in the room, which was true, and she leaned her head on my shoulder, and across the room her mother watched me do it. And I swear to you, she looked, for 1 second, almost sad. Not sorry. Sad. The way you might feel watching a good thing you've decided to sell. I didn't know yet that an hour later I'd hear my wife call that same child leverage in a kitchen. I only knew, sitting on that floor, that whatever these people were, my job was the ornament. Move it back to the light. Every time. As many times as it takes. You already know the toast. The most loyal man she ever married. You already know the hallway. He's too trusting to ever check. What you don't know is what happened at 10:40 that night in Sloane's kitchen when I went in for ice and found the sisters mid-sentence, and they didn't hear me come in over the dishwasher. After the holidays, Vivian was saying, "January, Mom's already got the account. I take the kids, I take the house, and if he gets difficult," she laughed, and it was not a warm laugh. It was Corinne's laugh coming out of her daughter's mouth. "If he gets difficult, I remind him whose kid Della really is. He'll fold. He always folds. He'd sign the sky away before he'd let Della hear it from me." Sloane said something I couldn't hear, and Vivian said the sentence that ended it, the sentence I will hear on my deathbed. "She's my leverage, Sloane. She always has been. Why do you think I kept her?" I set the ice bucket down very gently on the counter. Then I walked back out to the living room, and I found my daughter, and I knelt down next to her on the floor, and I said, "That's a beautiful snowflake, Della." And she beamed up at me like I'd hung the moon. And I decided, kneeling on Sloane's carpet with a paper snowflake in my hand, that Vivian was going to get her January. Just not the one she'd staged. I need to tell you about the 2 weeks between the party and the day it all came apart, because that's where I almost lost. And I won't pretend otherwise. Corinne found out I'd seen a lawyer. I still don't know how. Declan swears his office is tight, and I believe him, so I think it was simpler than a leak. I think I got careless for one afternoon. I think Vivian saw a missed call from a number with a family law firm's name, or found a parking stub, or just felt the temperature of the house change the way predators do. Corinne's daughters were raised to smell it when the foundation starts to think. Whatever it was, 3 days after Christmas, the plan moved up. I came home from a job site to find Vivian at the kitchen table with her mother beside her and the kids at Sloane's for a sleepover. No coats on the hooks. A folder of her own on the table. Thin, glossy, Delmar Stagings kind of folder, and a look on my wife's face I'd never seen aimed at me in 14 years. The look you give a house you're about to sell. "Sit down, Ramsey," Corinne said. Not Vivian, Corinne. That told me everything about who was really at the table. I sat. Vivian slid a paper across to me. Separation terms drawn up by her lawyer. Generous the way a trap is generous. She keeps the house. She keeps the kids. I keep my truck, my tools, and a number that would leave me renting a room by spring. She had a pen already uncapped, lying on the paper, pointing at me like it had a side. "We think it's best," Vivian said in the warm voice, the party voice, "if we do this quietly, for the kids." And then Corinne leaned in and she showed me exactly the kind of family I'd married into because she couldn't help herself. She never could. "And Ramsey," she said, "let's not make Della part of this. You wouldn't want her to learn something at 13 that would change how she sees her whole life, how she sees you." A pause, manicured and lethal. "Sign, and she never has to know a thing. Fight, and I can't promise what comes out." And Vivian, who had been letting her mother do the cutting, added her own edge because she wanted me to know it wasn't only Corinne. "It would break her, Ramsey," she said softly, folding her hands like a woman at a graveside. "You know how she is. She's sensitive. She adores you." A pause, weighed out to the gram. "Don't make me be the one who takes that away from her. Sign, and I never have to. Don't make me." As if the grenade were in my hand, as if her 14-year secret were a thing I'd be detonating on our daughter, instead of the thing they were, right now, holding to the child's ear. There it was. My daughter. Laid on the table like a chip. The kitchen went strange and bright. I could hear the refrigerator hum. I could hear Corinne's bracelet click against the table when she shifted. My ears rang the way they used to overseas, that high, thin note that means your body has decided something is about to happen before your mind agrees. I looked down and my hand had gone flat and white-knuckled on the pine wood, and I made it stay there, made it be still, because a man who slams a table in a room like this has just handed that room its whole story about him. I want to be honest about that 10 seconds, because it's the realest thing in this whole account. For 10 seconds, I was not calm and I was not strong. For 10 seconds, I was a tired man who'd been the foundation for 14 years, sitting in a kitchen he built, being told by two women that the price of his daughter's peace was his own erasure. And part of me, the oldest and most exhausted part, the part Corrine had been betting on since I was 20, wanted to pick up the pen just to make the ringing stop. Sign it. Fold one more time. It's what you're for. That's the whole plan, distilled to a single second. The reliable man cornered, choosing everyone else's comfort over his own existence, the way he always has. They didn't need me to lose. They needed me to be tired enough to quit. They'd watched me quit 1,000 small times, at 1,000 dinners, and they had no reason on earth to think this time was different. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the hallway past the kitchen doorway, where a framed birth certificate hung in the dark, and I thought about a girl asleep at Sloan's who'd made an ornament and waited all night for someone to notice. And I took my hand off the table. "No," I said. "Just that. Quiet. The way I say most things." Corrine blinked. Vivian's face did something complicated. Nobody at that table had a script for no. "I'm not going to sign this tonight," I said, standing up, buttoning my coat. "I'm going to go get my kids in the morning like it's a normal Saturday, because for them it's going to be. And then, Vivian, you and I are going to sit down with your mother and your sister and my lawyer, and we're going to talk about January. All of it." I looked at Corrine. "Everything you think you're holding. Bring it. Bring all of it." I walked to the door, then I stopped because there was one more thing, and they needed to hear it in my ordinary, boring, reliable voice. "You spent 14 years being sure I'd never check," I said. "You built the whole house on it." I opened the door to the cold. I checked in October, and I left them sitting there with a pen that had suddenly run out of ink. I barely slept, I'll be honest with you, because you've come this far, and you deserve the truth. I stood in my empty house that night. Kids at Sloan's, wife gone to her mother's, and I was not a triumphant man. I was a scared one. Because Corrine wasn't bluffing about Della. That was the one card I couldn't fully control. I could protect the house and the money with paper. I could not protect my daughter's heart from her own grandmother if they decided to detonate it out of spite. I called Declan at 11 p.m. He picked up on the first ring, because that's who he is. "They moved it up," I said. "They're threatening to tell Della. Tonight I told them to bring everyone to a sit-down. I might have just handed them a stage." Declan was quiet a moment. Then he said the thing that carried me through. "Ramsey, listen to me. You've spent 2 months afraid of that card because you've been protecting Della from the truth. But you've got it backwards, brother. The truth isn't the weapon. The lie is. The second that truth is out, the second it's just a fact in a room and not a secret in their pocket, it stops being leverage and starts being evidence of what she did, not of what you did." He let that land. "You've been treating this like it's your shame to keep. It was never yours. Let them say it out loud. Then let the room decide who should be ashamed." I sat down on the stairs in my dark house, and I understood, finally, the last thing I'd been getting wrong. I'd been guarding the secret like it was mine. Like the December, the dates, the man Vivian chose while I was overseas. Like any of that was a mark on me. Corrine had built a 14-year plan on my willingness to carry someone else's shame as if it were my own. I was done carrying it. If you've ever held someone else's secret so long, you started to believe the guilt was yours. Pause and hear me. Set it down. It was never your weight. Now let me tell you what happened in that room. But first I have to tell you about the 10 days in between, because that's when they went for the one thing I couldn't armor with paper. They went for Della. It started gentle, the way these things do. Corrine took her shopping twice that week, just the two of them, which had never happened in 13 years. Vivian started sitting on the edge of Della's bed at night, with the door mostly closed. And Della came out of those conversations quieter, watching me across rooms with a new little crease between her eyebrows. The look of a kid being handed a puzzle whose pieces don't fit the picture on the box. I knew exactly what was happening. They were pre-loading her, planning the doubt now so that when the truth came, on their terms, in their words, the ground would already be soft. Corrine would call it protecting the child. It was the opposite. It was reaching into the one room of my life they hadn't been able to stage and rearranging the furniture in the dark. I did not badmouth her mother. I want that on the record because it was the hardest restraint of all of them. Every instinct I had said to sit my daughter down and tell her everything first. to get there before they did. But a man who wins his kid by poisoning her against her mother hasn't won anything worth keeping. So I did the only thing I know how to do. I stayed the same. Thursday night that week, Della found me in the garage. With the arch, honestly, not the folder. I'd learned my lesson about the folder. And she leaned in the doorway the way she does when something's sitting on her. "Dad, can I ask you something weird?" "Always." She looked at the arch on the workbench, not at me. "If you found out something about somebody, something big, that maybe changed who you thought they were." She picked at the doorframe. "Would you still love them the same?" I set down the block I was holding. I did not ask what her grandmother had said in a car at the mall. I did not let one muscle in my face move toward panic. I just told her the truest thing I know in the plainest words I had, and I built it so the load would hold. "Depends what the thing is," I said. "Some things change everything. Somebody lies to you for years, that's a beam you have to look at hard, because you were trusting it to hold weight. It couldn't." She was very still. "But love, Della, real love, the kind you build with your hands over years, that's not a fact you find out. It's a thing you did on purpose 10,000 times. Nobody can find a piece of paper that undoes something you spent 13 years doing." She thought about that, 13 years old, turning it over the way she turned over the 2 blues in the craft store. 10,000 times, she repeated. "About that," I said. I stopped counting around the croup. She smiled, small, and the crease between her eyebrows eased a little. And she came over and leaned against my arm and looked at the arch. And after a while, she said, "The load makes it tighter." And I said, "That's my girl." And neither of us said anything else, because we didn't have to. They spent 10 days trying to soften the ground under my daughter. What they never understood is that I'd spent 13 years pouring the footing, and you cannot undo a footing with a car ride to the mall. We met the second Saturday of January, at my house at the kitchen table where they'd tried to make me fold. Vivian came. Corrine came in a camel coat, sure of herself. Delmar staging in human form. Sloane came pale and quiet, hovering near the door like she wanted to be anywhere else. And Declan came in his one good suit and set a plain accordion file on the table and said good morning to everyone by name, politely, the way you'd greet people you're about to help learn something. The kids were at my mother's. On purpose. Whatever was going to be said, Della would not be in the building to hear it. But she would, before the day was out, hear the only version that mattered, from me. Corrine opened, because of course she did. "We came to be reasonable," she said. "Ramsey, you've made this harder than it needs to be. Vivian is willing to be generous. But I think we all understand there are things in this family that are better left." "Let's start with the account," Declan said. Pleasant. Unhurried. He slid a bank statement across the table. $60,000, moved in small coded increments over 18 months out of the joint account into an account in Vivian's name alone. Wave 1. "This is marital property, concealed," Declan said. "In a divorce, this is called fraud, and courts do not treat it gently. It comes off the top, and it colors everything a judge believes about who's been honest in this marriage." He looked at Vivian, not unkindly. "You'll want to disclose it before we're asked. It goes better that way." Vivian's chin came up. "That's my money. I earned—" "You coded it as household," Declan said. "That's not saving. That's hiding. You know the difference, and so will a judge." Corrine jumped in fast, the way she does when a story starts slipping. "This is exactly why we wanted to keep this quiet. Ramsey, sign the terms and none of this ugliness." "The house," Declan said, and slid the next page across wave 2. "VA entitlement. Pre-marriage. My name. The separate contribution records I'd kept for years because I keep everything. Because I'm the reliable one. Because reliable, it turns out, is a legal asset. The framing invoices with my signature. The weekend I built the deck. Dated. Photographed. Filed. The house on Ridgeline is substantially Ramsey's separate property," Declan said. "It is not Vivian's to take or to stage or to sell. I have 3 years of documentation, and he has the labor records. This isn't a fight you win. This is a fact you accept." The camel coat went very still. Corrine had staged 100 houses. She knew, better than anyone at that table, what it means when the foundation turns out to be someone else's. And that's when Vivian reached for the only weapon she had left, The one Corrine had told her since she was 19 that a woman should always keep loaded. She reached for Della. "Fine," Vivian said, and her voice changed. No more party warmth, just the cold thing underneath. "You want to play it all the way out, Ramsey? Then let's play it out. Let's talk about Della." She looked at Declan like she was about to end the meeting. "Ramsey isn't her father. I've known since the day she was born. So before he sits here acting like the wrong saint, maybe everyone should know that the whole sweet family he's fighting for is built on you," I said. It was the first thing I'd said in 20 minutes, and the room turned to me like I'd dropped a glass. I opened my folder, my plain manila folder from the drugstore that had ridden in my toolbox under the socket set for 3 months. Wave 3, mine. I laid out the deployment orders, the entry stamp, the exit stamp, the dates a government stamped on paper because it does not care about anyone's feelings, and beside them Della's birth certificate with my name on the line marked father, where it had been for 13 years. "I left the country in the fall," I said to the whole table in my ordinary voice. "I came home the following summer. Della was conceived in December. I have the stamps. I've had them since October. I did the math the day the bank asked me for these papers, and I have known this entire time exactly what you just tried to use as a weapon." Silence. The good kind. The kind Declan had promised me. "You thought that was your leverage," I said to Vivian. "You said so at Sloane's in the kitchen when you thought I'd gone for ice. She's my leverage. Why do you think I kept her?" Sloane made a small sound by the door. "I heard you. I've heard you for months. And here's what you never understood, either of you, because you were too busy staging the house to read the law that holds it up." I turned to Declan. He said it, because it should come from the man with the diploma. "Della was born inside the marriage," Declan said. "Ramsey is her legal father and has been since birth. The window to contest paternity in this state closed when she was a toddler, over a decade ago. It is shut, permanently. No test, no confession, no grandmother in a nice coat can reopen it. In every way the law recognizes, and it recognizes all the ways that matter for custody, that child is his." He looked at Vivian. "The truth you were saving to threaten him with. It doesn't take Della away from him. It's just a written record of the one who lied, for 14 years. Something happened to Vivian's face then. The party warmth was gone, and the cold thing was gone too, and for 1 second I saw the girl I met at a cookout when I was 20, before her mother finished the job on her. Then it closed over, and she reached for the last tool she had, the one Corrine swears by. She started to cry. "You don't understand what it was like," she said. "I was 20. You were gone. I was scared and alone. And I made one mistake, and then you came home so happy, and I couldn't. How was I supposed to—" The tears were real, and the aim was not. Even now she was staging the room. "I gave that girl a father. I gave her you. You should be thanking me." And there it was. Her own words, out loud, in front of a lawyer and her sister. She hung herself with the exact sentence Corrine taught her. The one where the lie becomes a gift you gave the man you lied to. "You didn't give me Della," I said. Quiet, steady, the way I say most things. "You gave me 14 years of not knowing which parts of my life were real. Della, I'd have chosen anyway. I did choose her. Every day you spent hiding the dates, I spent showing up. Don't you dare hand me a girl I already carried and call it your generosity." Declan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just quietly turned a fresh page in his legal pad, and Vivian saw him do it. Saw her own tearful confession becoming a line in a record, and the tears stopped like a faucet. "You can't use that," she said. "That's not—" I was upset. "You concealed the account," Declan said mildly. "You planned to threaten a man's relationship with his child to extract a signature. You just described to a room timing that no one asked you about." He capped his pen. "I'm not using anything, Vivian. I'm writing down what you keep choosing to say." The house was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a plow scraped the street. I thought about my kids at my mother's. Theo with his glove, Della with her arch. And I held on to the reason I was doing this the calm way instead of the loud way. Not to win the room. To make sure that when the dust settled, 2 kids still had 2 parents who could stand to be in a school gym at the same time. Even now. Even her. Corrine stood up. "This is— Sit down, Mom." That was Sloane. We all turned. My sister-in-law, who'd hovered by the door all morning, stepped forward, and her hands were shaking, and her eyes were wet, and she looked at her sister and then at me. "I can't," Sloane said. "I can't do this one, Viv. I've watched you use that kid like a bargaining chip since she was a baby, and I told myself it wasn't my business." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Ramsey took the ice bucket and set it down so gently that night. I saw him. He heard everything. And he went and told your daughter her snowflake was beautiful." Her voice broke. "You don't get to have him be the villain. He's the only one of us who ever actually showed up." And that was the moment it stopped being a negotiation and became what it always was. A family looking, finally, at what it had done. Vivian didn't cry the way you'd think. She got angry the way Corrine taught her. Because for these women, anger is the last dignity. The thing you reach for when the story you staged collapses and you refuse to stand in the wreckage. She stood up and she said terrible things. That I'd trapped her, that I'd hidden the folder to humiliate her, that a real man would have said something in October instead of smiling for 3 months. And I let her. I didn't defend it, because there was one true thing in all of it, and I owed her that much. "You're right," I said quietly when she ran out of words. "I did smile for 3 months. That's the part I'll answer for. I smiled because I have 2 kids and I wanted to walk out of this with them and not with a war. I'm not proud of the smiling. But Vivian," and here my voice did the thing I'd kept it from doing for 3 months. "It went rough. Just once. You had 14 years to tell me, and you spent them deciding not to. Every anniversary, every birthday. You looked at me loving her, and you kept the dates in your pocket in case you ever needed them. I only kept mine for 90 days, and I kept them to protect her from you." Nobody said anything. Then I closed the folder. Declan let the quiet sit for a moment. Then he did the thing lawyers do that nobody thanks them for. He made the future boring, on purpose, because boring is where the reliable man wins. "Here's where we are," he said evenly to the whole table. "Ramsey files first this week. Full financial disclosure. The account included Vivian, which you'll amend voluntarily because the alternative is a forensic accountant and a judge who already doesn't like you. The house is established separate property. It stays with Ramsey, and so does primary residence for the children, with generous parenting time for their mother. Nobody weaponizes the child's paternity because it changes nothing legally, and it exposes exactly one person if it's raised." He looked just briefly at Corrine. "And nobody from Del Mar Staging touches the marital home to list it, appraise it, or photograph it again." That last one landed on Corrine like a drop beam, and I watched her understand something she should have understood in October. She'd spent a career selling the idea that presentation is the only truth, and she'd just been shown in her son-in-law's kitchen that under the staging there's always a foundation, and the foundation is the truth, and the truth had my name on it. She gathered her camel coat around her like the room had gotten cold. "We'll be speaking to our own attorney," she said, which is what people say when they've just been told they've already lost. "You should," Declan said pleasantly. "Ask them about concealment of marital assets. Ask them what a family court thinks of a plan to threaten a 13-year-old's sense of who her father is. Ask them," and here his voice didn't rise at all, which is how I knew he meant it, "how it goes for the side that lied for 14 years against the side that kept every receipt." They left not long after. Vivian went last. She stopped in the doorway of the house I built, and for a second, I thought she might say the real thing, the human thing, the thing that was somewhere under 14 years of staging. She looked at me, and her mouth opened. Then Corrine called her name from the driveway, and my wife's face closed like a listing that's gone under contract, and she walked out to her mother's car without a word. I stood in my kitchen, the folder on the table, 2 coffee cups Declan had poured, blue coins of afternoon light coming through the window onto the floor, from nothing, from the sky, and I thought of an ornament on the good side of a tree. Then I let out a breath I'd been holding since October, and I went to go get my kids. If you've made it this far, you already know this story was never really about a date on a piece of paper. It's about a kid and who chose her and who kept her in a pocket. So before I tell you the last part, if you've ever had to protect a child from the very people who were supposed to love them, I hope you know what you did mattered. Tell me about it if you want. I'll be reading. Now let me tell you about Della, because she gets the last word, the way she should. I picked the kids up from my mother's that evening. Theo fell asleep in the truck before we hit the highway, cookie crumbs on his shirt, the way he does. Della sat up front with me and watched the streetlights go by and finally said, in the careful voice kids use when they've felt the ground move, even if nobody's told them why, "Is Mom moving out?" I'd promised myself the whole drive I would not lie to her. Not one more lie in this family. She'd had enough for a lifetime and didn't even know it. "Yeah, baby," I said. "Your mom and I aren't going to be married anymore. You're going to stay in your room, in our house, and I'm going to be right down the hall like always. And you'll see your mom too. But the house stays. And I stay. That part's not changing. Not ever." She was quiet for a mile. Then she said, "Okay, good." And after another mile, smaller, I heard Grandma say something once, about me, about how I'm not. She stopped. 13 years old, choosing her words in the dark of a truck cab, braver than every adult who'd handled her like a chip. I pulled over. I don't recommend driving through what came next. "Della," I said, and I turned in my seat so she could see my whole face. "I'm going to tell you something one time, and I need you to keep it, okay? A long time ago, before you were born, some things happened between grown-ups that were complicated, and someday, when you're older, if you want to know all of it, I'll tell you every part, and I won't leave anything out. But here is the only thing that's true tonight." I took her hand, my daughter's hand, the one I taught to grip a bike handle on Ridgeline Court. "I'm your dad. I have been your dad since before you could breathe on your own. I chose you the day you were born, and I have chosen you every single day since. And I did the math, kid, as I did all the math there is. And it comes out the same every time. You're mine. Nothing anybody ever says changes that. Nothing." And my daughter looked at me in the light from the dashboard, this girl who'd spent 13 years being someone's leverage without knowing it. And she said the thing I will carry to the end of my life. "I know, Dad," she said, like it was the most obvious fact in the world. "You're my dad. You've always been my dad." I have inspected 1,000 structures in my life. I have crawled under houses and read them for the fracture that means collapse. And I want to tell you that no beam I ever tested, no footing I ever poured, held the way those 7 words held. Every load I'd carried in silence since October. The garage, the math, the party, the pen on the table, the 10 seconds when I almost quit. Every ounce of it came to rest right there, on a 13-year-old's certainty in the dark of a truck cab. The load makes it tighter. She told me that herself over a pile of blocks, and she was right, and she'd just proven it on the one structure that mattered. "Yeah," I managed. "I have, and I always will be. That's the one thing in this whole world that's not up for a vote." "Okay," she said. Simple. Settled. A keystone dropping into place. Then she leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she did when she was small, and we drove the rest of the way home in the good kind of quiet. The divorce went the way Declan said it would, which is to say quietly and fairly, and without the war Corrine had trained her daughter to fight. The hidden $60,000 came off the top and paid for itself in the settlement. The house stayed mine, and the kids. Same rooms, same hallway, same frame birth certificate I have decided to leave right where it is, because that name on the father line is mine, and I earned it the long way, one croup night and one science project at a time. Vivian got her January. She got the freedom she'd been quietly buying with our grocery money for 18 months. She lives across town now, near Corrine in a staged apartment with nice throw pillows. The kids see her every other weekend. She is, I'll say this plainly, a good enough mother in small doses, and I've never said one word against her to either of them. That's not restraint. That's just the last thing I can do for 2 kids who didn't ask for any of this. Let them love their mother without carrying my ledger. Corrine doesn't come around. Sloan does. She showed up in February with a casserole and an apology and stayed for the science fair, where Della's load-bearing arch took second place and held 40 pounds of textbooks without a crack. And Sloan cried a little, and I pretended not to see, because that's what family does when it's finally acting like family. The blue ornament hangs in our front window now. Not the tree, the window, year-round, where the morning light comes through and throws those little blue coins on the living room floor. Della moved it there herself in January without being asked, and she's never explained it, and I've never asked her to. Some things you don't put on the dark side of the tree. Some things you hang where the light has to hit them every single day, so nobody in the house ever forgets they're there. People ask me if I'm angry. I was for a while. I'm a man, not a monument, but anger is a heavy folder to carry in your toolbox, and I've got kids who need the room. Here's what I know now, and it's the only wisdom I've got, so I'll keep it short the way I keep most things. They told my wife I was too trusting to ever check. They were right. I trusted her with 14 years and a whole life. What none of them understood, what Corrine never taught her daughters because it would have ruined the whole business, is that trust isn't blindness. It's a door you leave open on purpose. And a man who leaves the door open can also, on the day it matters, walk through it. The folder's still in my toolbox, under the socket set. I don't open it anymore. I don't need to. I did all the math there is, and it comes out the same every time. She's mine. This house is mine. And the reliable one, it turns out, was never the fool at the table. He was just the last one still standing when the staging came down,